Hey, it's good to see you again. A warm welcome back to Heroes Behind the Badge. We tell real stories about real cops, we expose the fake news about police, and we give you the real truth. This podcast is brought to you by Citizens Behind the Badge, the leading voice of the American people in support of the men and women of law enforcement in the United States of America. For more information about how you can get involved in supporting the men and women of law enforcement, it's citizensbehindthebadge.org. That's citizensbehindthebadge.org. I'm your host for today, Dennis Collins. I'm a founding director of Citizens Behind the Badge and a very proud law enforcement father. Joining me today, as always, my colleagues, Mr. Bill Erfurth and Mr. Craig Floyd. Let's say hello, first of all, to Mr. Bill Erfurth. Good afternoon, sir.
Hello, everyone. Glad you're joining us, and make sure that you don't hesitate in clicking that follow button so that every time a new podcast hits, you'll be the first to know.
Absolutely. Billy, always make sure we remind you. And, a lot of people have told me they've been listening, but they're not hitting subscribe or like or follow. So, when you hit those one, two, or all three of those buttons, that helps us. That helps the algorithm tell the powers that be that this is an important podcast, that you enjoyed hearing what was on the podcast. It also gives you the first chance to hear about new episodes. So make sure you click follow, subscribe, like all three. That would be great. By the way, Bill Erfurth is a 26-year-old veteran of Miami-Dade Police. He retired as a lieutenant. He has a very interesting career. I keep telling him that one day we should feature his stories on this podcast, and he says no way. So I guess we may never hear about all of his escapades. He is also a founding director of Citizens Behind the Badge. Please now say hello to our founder, our CEO, the chairman emeritus of the Law Enforcement Officers Memorial and Museum in Washington, D.C. It's Craig Floyd. Hello, Craig.
Dennis, it's a pleasure once again to be with you and Bill. And I will say, prior to your introduction of our guest, that this is a longtime old friend of mine. We've kind of grown up together a bit in the world of law enforcement, and I couldn't be prouder to have him on our show today. So I'm going to turn it back to you for the introduction of our very special guest today.
And I agree. Having not met Randy before, I've kind of met him here by, the research that we've done, and I can't wait to hear his story. Randy Sutton, 34-year law enforcement veteran. He's the founder and chairman of the Wounded Blue, dedicated to improving the lives of injured and disabled law enforcement officers. The story behind Wounded Blue is quite interesting, and I'm sure that he will tell us about that today in today's episode. Randy's nationally known as a media commentator on law enforcement issues. He served 10 years in Princeton, New Jersey Police Department and 24 years with the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. He retired at the rank of lieutenant. He is recognized as one of the most highly decorated officers in the history of Las Vegas Metro PD. He's a prolific author, and I'm sure we'll talk about his many books during this episode. He's also earned appearances in movies and TV shows. Yes, this gentleman is fluent in all different media languages. He's also the host of his own popular podcast and live talk radio show, a weekly podcast called A Cop's Life, which you can hear and I'm sure view on any of your places where you get your podcast. And Randy, you were invited to speak last year at the Republican National Convention. And I did not see that live, but I did look that up. The video is all over the internet if you guys are interested in seeing it. And very impressive speech, but there's a couple words you said in that speech that are extremely powerful. They relate to what you do in Wounded Blue. They relate to what we do in Citizens Behind the Badge. And here's what you said. It's about the effort to divide the people from the police. This is about the soul of America. If they succeed at defunding and destroying policing as we know it, they will break apart the cornerstone of our law enforcement system. Very, very strong words, very profound, very much interested in hearing what's behind those words. Welcome to Heroes Behind the Badge. You are a true hero behind the badge, and we can't wait to hear your story.
I thank you so much for having me, you guys. It's a pleasure to be here. It's good to be with my friend Craig, who, like you said, he and I go back a long, long time. And, you guys are all amazing patriots. You care deeply about the law enforcement community, because without the law enforcement community, the United States as we know it doesn't exist. Wow. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. I'm going to throw it to our boss, our CEO and president of Citizens Behind the Badge, Craig Floyd. Let's talk to Randy.
And thank you. And I want to follow up on the introduction there. I saw the speech that you gave at the Republican National Convention, and I must say I was a bit shocked when I turned the TV on that night to watch it. It was a pro-law enforcement night at the convention. There were a lot of speakers like you endorsing Trump and his support for law enforcement. But I got to be curious. How did Randy Sutton, my friend, get selected to speak at the Republican National Convention?
Well, I got to tell you, as surprised as you were to see me, that's how surprised I was to get invited. I literally just a couple weeks before the convention, I get a phone call from the Republican National Committee, and I thought they were going to ask me for money again, right? And so I get this call, and this woman says, "Hey, your name has been put forward to be a speaker on law enforcement at the Republican National Convention." And I said, "It was? I didn't know anything about it. Who recommended me?" And she gave me a name, and it's not a name that I recognized. And I said, "I don't know who that is, but it sounds like an incredible honor." So that began the vetting process of this amazing opportunity. And they said, "We're going to assign a speechwriter to you." And I said, "Well, I don't need you to assign a speechwriter. I write my own stuff." And they said, "Oh no, you're getting a speechwriter." Yeah. So they went through some vetting process, clearly, first of all. And then they assign a speechwriter, and he calls me, and I tell him I'll write my own speech. He says, "That's fine, but it still has to go through me." So I wrote the speech. Now it had to be, this was the criteria, no more than 300 words. And I went, 300 words? That's the greeting of a speech. That's not even the speech. He says, "Well, that's what you got to work with, 300 words. And I was okay. So I wrote what I wrote, sent it to him. He made a couple of changes. I made a couple of changes, and then it went up the ladder to the next level. And they actually returned a lot of my words back to it, and it wound up to be 378 words. Now that number will stick in my brain for the rest of my life. I had 378 words to say the most important thing I could ever say to the American people, and it was a hell of a challenge. And then I get there. They flew me out, put me in a beautiful hotel. It was very, very well organized. And then but what they, and I had to practice for a little bit there. They showed me the stage, and it was very intimidating. I've given a lot of speeches, but not to 40 million people, right? and they said, "Whatever you do not deviate from this speech one tiny little bit. That's the one rule we have." So the big night comes, and I wasn't nervous until I got up into the green room, and I'm up there with Ted Cruz and Ron DeSantis. And I got to tell you, I got a little dry mouth at that point, right? and
Randy Sutton now.
So Ron DeSantis was after me. Cruz was before me. And Cruz gets done. They literally have somebody at the stage entrance to push you out there in case you get stage fright, which I did not get. But I was nervous until I walked out onto that stage. and thousands of people were screaming, "Back the blue, back the blue." And at that moment, you guys, I've never felt anything like it. I literally felt like electricity was surging into my body. And I walked out and onto that stage and I was committed. And it was literally the opportunity of a lifetime. I'll never have that feeling again, but I can remember it as if it was just yesterday. The energy that I felt from all those people. And I look over there and there's President Trump looking at me. And I gave the speech exactly as I wrote it until I didn't. And then I just felt this. I was almost at the end and I said, before I end this speech, there's something I have to do. And I can imagine that the powers that be must have been losing their minds because this was not in the script. And I said, I need to salute my president. And I turned and I saluted him and he stood up and saluted me back. And I got to tell you, you guys, that was the moment of a lifetime.
What
So
a
I
moment.
hope the Republican National Committee forgives me for that deviation, but it was worthwhile. It was worth doing it.
Well, you nailed it, if I may say so. I couldn't imagine a better speaker, more eloquent, and powerful, and from the heart. I mean, your words were presented from somebody. It was genuine. It was authentic, and I really admired you for the job you did that day representing law enforcement and the support that President Trump has received from law enforcement during his first 4 years in office and that he's getting now. Let's go to Randy Sutton's background because we want to talk today about the Wounded Blue, the organization you've started to help injured and disabled law enforcement officers. It's a fabulous organization, much needed. There wasn't anything like it before you started it. But we need to tell Randy's story before we understand why you created the Wounded Blue. And I want to start with, Dennis mentioned 10 years in Princeton, New Jersey, serving there as a police officer. But then you made the switch from a small town, Princeton, New Jersey, the home of the Princeton University, and you went to Las Vegas, Nevada. I can't imagine a bigger change. And I have to ask you why you did that. And obviously, I think you had quite a career in Las Vegas, so you must have enjoyed it. But tell me why you made the switch.
So I was very, when I grew up, I knew what I wanted to be. I was going to be a cop. That was from the time I was a little kid. And Princeton was my hometown. And I became a cadet when I was in high school and got a little flavor of it. And then wound up getting hired at the ripe old age of 19, which was way too young to be a cop. I didn't know that at the time, but I certainly learned that lesson as years went by. But I was fortunate in that, I did get hired at a very young age. And because it was a small community, we had 32 police officers. I knew everybody in the town. We called ourselves grin and wave cops. Hi, Mrs. Jones, how are you? As we were driving down the street. But I was bored to death as a small town cop, is really what it comes down to. And so halfway to retirement, I realized I can't do this for the rest of my career. I need some action. I need some challenges in my life. And 2 FBI agents told me about the Las Vegas Metro Police Department, what a great department it was, and how it was a really happening place, and the department was growing along with the city. So I came out to Vegas. I tested. They offered me the job, and I was off to the races. I had to start all over again. I had to go to the academy again. I had to start my career all over. And I was a topped out detective in Princeton. Well, you better kind of stow your ego if you're going through the academy again. And it was a challenge, man. Going back through another academy at 30 instead of when I went as a young man. So never looked back. It was the best decision I ever made. I never could have accomplished what I have had it not been for, making that move. But it also came with, be careful what you wish for, right? I was
Let me jump in there because you and Bill Erfurth, my co-host and friend, have a lot in common. You seem to gravitate toward the action. You don't want to be bored with the job of a law enforcement officer. You want to be excited and challenged by it. And here's a statistic that not a lot of people know. I quote it a lot. A few years ago, every officer in America, or a sampling anyway, were surveyed as to how many times they had ever fired their weapon in the line of duty. The answer was 73% had never fired their weapon in the line of duty, and in all likelihood, that 73% probably never will. Randy Sutton, because I know you so well, I know this story. You fired your weapon in the line of duty 5 times. You were involved in 5 officer-involved shootings, 2 of them fatal shootings, where the suspect, the criminal, justifiably was shot and killed by Randy Sutton. I know the second shooting incident in particular was one that was as much life or death. It's just amazing to think that you came out of it alive. But for our audience, I would like you to share that second shooting story where you went gun barrel to gun barrel with a criminal who was crazed and was out there looking to kill somebody. And fortunately, you survived. But tell us that story.
Well, that was a life-changing moment. Every officer that does get involved in an officer-involved shooting experiences something different, and every situation is unique unto itself. This particular shooting that was so life-changing for me resulted from an active shooter situation. Now, at that time, we didn't call them active shooters. We didn't have a name for them. It was some guy, crazed gunman, shooting at kids at a high school dance. And it was Saturday night. It was 9:00. I was coming out of the restaurant having dinner with my old partner. And the call came out that there was a guy dressed all in black with bandoliers of ammunition around him and a shoulder holster. And he was shooting at kids at a high school dance. And it was literally 2 blocks from where I was. And at first I thought, this sounds so crazy. Can't be true. But within seconds, we realized this was the real deal because there were 2 couples on a double date following this guy. And they were on the phone with 911. Okay, he's shooting at the kids again. They're diving for cover. And he realized that he was being followed by this car. And he turned around and he fired around and went right through the windshield between the heads of these 2 couples. At which point the driver said, "I think I've done my civic duty," and off he went. And I was pulling onto the street. Our helicopter got there, our air unit. There was another police car pulling up before me, and I see the 2 officers. It was a field training officer and his trainee, and they jump out of their cars. They're pointing their guns, and their spotlights and headlights are on the suspect, who's walking directly towards them, very nonchalantly, with the gun in his hand, dressed all in black, just like the report. And I'm expecting in the next few seconds they're going to shoot him, or he's going to run, or he's going to shoot himself, or he's going to surrender. All this is playing out in the just milliseconds as I'm pulling onto the scene. But he does something nobody expects. He literally just nonchalantly walks towards the police car, holsters his gun, and then just saunters on past the 2 cops that are standing there. And they're left standing there holding their guns, pointing them at him, and they just let him walk by him. Well, I jump out of my car. The suspect starts walking up an apartment driveway towards a group of people. And of course, I can't let him get to those people. But he's walking away from me. His gun is holstered. Now, am I legally justified in shooting him? Sure. But remember, this isn't just a professional decision, you guys. This is a very personal decision. You're going to live with this for the rest of your life. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to try and take him physically. So I ran up behind him. I had my gun in my hand. He turned at the moment that he heard me running. And when he turned, I did like a karate flying side kick to his abdomen. Well, didn't work. When he went down from the impact, he came up with the gun, and he and I were literally standing toe to toe. And we both fired at exactly the same moment. And our gun muzzles were just about touching. And I should let you know that I was not wearing any body armor at this time.
Bad decision.
And but I fired 2 rounds, and then the nightmare that we all actually have actually happened. My gun jammed. And now I'm going click, 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 and he's going boom, boom, boom. And I'm thinking, this is what it's going to be like to die. What's it going to feel like when that bullet impacts my body? But I had no cover. There was nowhere to go. So relying on instinct, to get out of his line of fire, I dropped down and rolled onto my back, and I'm trying to clear my gun, twisting from side to side as he's trying to shoot me. And little pieces of asphalt are hitting me in the head. And then the rotor wash from the helicopter above, that's stirring up all kinds of sticks and dirt and rocks, and that's hitting me. And I'm thinking, is that the one? Is that the one that's going to take me? And now the helicopter sees the muzzle flashes, sees me go down, and what do they radio? Officer down, shots fired. Well, remember the 2 cops that got there before me? They figure now is a good time to start shooting at this guy. So now their bullets are zinging over my head. This guy's trying to shoot me, and I got a gun that ain't working. And literally, as I'm twisting from side to side, trying to get my gun to work, out of the blue, my old partner drives in. He heard the radio traffic. He sees the suspect, and he aims his police car at him. He's just going to run him over. And it was a good theory, but what happens in a situation like this? You get tunnel vision. So he didn't see this big cement stanchion that was in the way. So he hit that stanchion with his police car at about 30 miles an hour. It sounded like a bomb went off. So it didn't have the effect that he had wanted, which was to run him over, but it did take his attention away from me because of the explosion. And I was able to get up. I've now got my gun working again, and he and I are in a toe-to-toe gunfight. And I'm literally staring at him in the eyes as I'm pumping round after round after round. I had a 15-round mag, and I emptied it. And he's still standing there shooting at me. And it's funny, the stuff you remember from a thing like this. I remember thinking this thought: I'm the world's worst fucking shot. That's what I remember. If I survive, I'm going to the ring, right? And then I do a combat reload, and he runs. I run after him. My old partner runs after him. And we're in a running gun battle with him now. And he goes around the corner of the building, and as we come around the corner, I hear him scream, "Die, motherfucker, die." And he was hiding behind a bush. And we just emptied our guns into that bush. And that's where the gunfight ended. And my first 2 shots hit him dead in the chest when they did the autopsy. He was only 5'6", 140 pounds, but it's not like TV. He had 43 gunshot wounds by the time this thing was over.
Wow.
And he didn't slow down for a bit. Now, what's interesting about this story that has some correlation to what these cops are going through today, my partner and I never talked about this night for years. And about 10 years went by, and he and I are in a bar. I know that shocks you. He and I were in a bar, and we're drinking, and finally it came out. It came up, this shooting. And I said to him, "How about that crazy son of a bitch screaming, 'Die, motherfucker, die'?" And he didn't say anything, but I see him looking at me in the mirror. And I turned to him. I said, "What are you looking at?" He says, "You really don't know, do you?" And I said, "Don't know what?" He says, "Randy, he never said a word. That was you."
Wow.
Now, Let me ask
Wow.
you something. If that happened today, and I'm screaming, die motherfucker die, as I'm pumping bullets into a guy, where am I going to be at the end of this gunfight?
Gonna be crucified,
Crucified.
criticized.
Randy's gunfight story shows the reality of police work, far from the Hollywood version most people see. He survived going gun barrel to gun barrel with the killer, which gave him what he calls his journey of why, the belief he was saved for a specific purpose. But Randy's career didn't end there. Another life-changing moment was coming, a medical emergency that would reveal how quickly a department can abandon one of their own. That betrayal became the catalyst for an organization that has now helped over 15,000 injured officers. Join us for part 2 as Randy shares how his darkest moment became a beacon of hope for forgotten officers across America. Make sure to subscribe and follow Heroes Behind the Badge and visit citizensbehindthebadge.org.